What is up, everyone? I'm Kimmi Chex. That bald dude is Adam Rank, and this is NFL Fantasy Bites. Adam Rank, happy week 10. How are you, my friend?
Oh my gosh, I'm wonderful. Week 10 is kicking off. We're in the double-digit weeks. The Masters is going on right now. My friend Deeker and I have been watching. We're also paying attention to our fantasy teams, but we're also watching this. How you living, Kimmi, though?
I'm good. I can't believe it's week 10. Like, I had a double check before we started shooting the show. I was like, wait, it's week 10 already? Oh my God, that means fantasy playoffs are so soon. And then the regular playoffs for the NFL season. And then we got Super Bowl. Our halftime performer was just announced earlier today. That's going to be The Weeknd performing down in Tampa Bay. So we're getting closer and closer, which makes me sad because then I won't get to see you and hang out with you as much every single day.
That will be a bummer.
I know, bad. It's okay. It's okay. I'll tweet at you. I'll text you. I'll at you like all these other fools do in fantasy football. All right, tell the people what we got coming up on the show today.
Oh my gosh, we got a lot of cool stuff. This is actually, like, no lie, this is my favorite show of the week. So we're going to be going over our fantasy bites of the week. We've got our Club Dub Players of the Week. Do we do Club Dub Players of the Week? Is that this show? I don't know. We're going to pick guys that are going to go off. And Michael F. Florio is going to be joining us, as long as he's wearing a floral shirt, I should say. Because if he's not, then we're going to have an empty B block. And but it's going to be good. That's going to be a good show. I'm really looking forward to this.
All right, let's kick it off. Let's do our bite of the week. You're up first. Give me what you got.
Well, I'm going to start with Kyler Murray, who has been absolutely fantastic this season. I know a lot of us went into this year drafting him thinking, like, I hope he's this year's Lamar Jackson, which is kind of an unreal expectation to put on a young man. But he's been crushing it. And as a matter of fact, he is averaging 400, or he's on pace, I should say, for 467 fantasy points this season. That would shatter Patrick Mahomes' single-season quarterback record of 417.08 set in 2018. And I know there was a kid on Instagram who was like, you know, Russell Wilson is on pace for, and I'm like, well, actually, it is Kyler Murray who's on pace for the record-breaking season. He's had 37 points in back-to-back weeks. And I think the big question, Kim, that you would have that I'm not going to allow you to ask, I'm just going to jump into and answer it myself, is what do we do with him against the Bills? Because it's kind of a tough matchup. The Bills have allowed the 7th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks over the last month. They created a lot of turnovers last week against Russell Wilson. But for me, I think Kyler Murray has now started to step up and step into that role of he's an automatic start. Perhaps you insulated yourself with some other quarterback this season, just in case you weren't quite sure if he was going to be the breakout guy that we've all seen so far. There should be no hesitation, even in what is perceived as a tough matchup, as long as he doesn't turn the ball over. If you look at Russell Wilson's touchdown and his other production, I think he's going to be great. Christian Kirk's great. DeAndre Hopkins is great. And he does this. He runs the football. So to that, I have no worries about Kyler Murray. So I'm a huge fan.
I love that. I want to run it back to like preseason or week 1 because I said, and I predicted, I don't think it was on this show, it may have been NFL Fantasy Live. I said, I believe that Kyler Murray is going to be the fantasy MVP this year. A lot of people were like, no, that's crazy. But like you just said, he is on pace to shatter my guy Patrick Mahomes' single season record at the quarterback position. So Kyler Murray, keep on keeping on. We're all rooting for you. All right, it's time for my bite of the week, and I'm going to talk about Will Fuller. Now, this is a crazy stat. This is why I want to really get into it. Will Fuller has scored a touchdown in 6 straight games. The only player to have more touchdowns in that streak is Dalvin Cook. You guys, Will Fuller has scored a touchdown in 6 straight games. Before this season, there are a lot of people saying, oh no, he's a wide receiver too. Maybe he's a flex guy. No, Will Fuller is good. This is the longest streak by any Texans wide receiver in franchise history. I know it's been a little bit of a disappointing season for Deshaun Watson, but that connection between him and Will Fuller, especially getting him the ball into the end zone, has been dynamic. So if you are a fantasy manager that has Will Fuller, I'm sure you are very happy and you should continue to be happy, especially this week as the Texans take on the Browns. The Browns are allowing the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers this season. So I think Will Fuller can keep the streak up and hopefully go for 7 consecutive touchdowns in a game. All right.
Yeah, I was gonna give you credit for that again. I believe like it was you and I. We felt like we were on an island trying to defend Will Fuller because a lot of people were talking about the injury concerns. And I remember this distinctly in some of those preseason shows, just saying, you know, I understand. Like the players, battle injuries and everything like that. But I thought that Will Fuller had the talent, especially with DeAndre Hopkins gone, to have the opportunity to have the season that he's having. I think what I'm really trying to say is that you and I have a lot of game, and you should just listen to us. That's really what you should be drawing from all of this.
I know I shouldn't pay attention to social media, but I read the comments. Everyone's like, these people suck. They don't know what they're talking about. All right, whatever. We predicted all of these right. Let's get into something we haven't done before. This is juicy matchup times, but I want to focus on the quarterback position because the guy we were talking about earlier in terms of his record, Patrick Mahomes, he's out on a bye, right? So then a lot of other people are going to start to look other quarterbacks this week. So let's get into the juiciest matchups in Week 10 at the quarterback position. Let's start with this one. Drew Brees versus the 49ers or Josh Allen versus the Cardinals. Mind you, Drew Brees just came off of that huge game, that huge win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers where he completely stomped over Tom Brady. Josh Allen also just had his bounce back game against the Seahawks. Which guy has the juicier matchup?
Oh, man. I don't hate Drew Brees' matchup against the 49ers because obviously that's a different team with Nick Bosa out and everything. But I'm going to lean towards Josh Allen. Matchup-wise, I still believe it's pretty good. The Cardinals have given up a lot of production to the quarterbacks this season. As a matter of fact, they've allowed the fourth most fantasy points per game to the position since Week 7, coming in at just over 25 points per game. They've allowed nearly 300 yards passing per game this season, 287.4 if you want to be exact. That's seventh. To me, I just like this matchup. And, the good thing about, I know we're talking matchups, but the one thing that I really like too is that Josh Allen gives you the running ability. Like he comes in with 40 rushing yards every game. So I think that Drew Brees passing wise, like head to head could kind of be even. But I think that the running ability for Josh Allen pushes him over the top for me.
I agree. Josh Allen, he is my guy. I never faded him because I know a lot of people were really concerned because the first half of the season, he was incredible. And then he kind of died down. He was only averaging, I think, 15, 16 fantasy points a game. But then he truly did have his bounce back moment against the Seahawks. This is going to be an incredible matchup. Him, Kyler Murray, who's going to be better at the quarterback position? Who's going to throw for more touchdowns? Josh Allen all the way. All right, speaking of another juicy matchup, these are two young guys. Same draft class, both rookies. It's Justin Herbert versus the Dolphins, or Tua versus the Chargers. These guys going head to head. I think I know where we're going to lean on this one. We're probably going to say Justin Herbert, but I still want to toss it up there of who you think has the juicier matchup.
Yeah, I think if we're picking the quarterback that we're going to start, I think it's easy. We're going to go Justin Herbert. But I did want to stand up for Tua Tagovailoa here for a moment and really dive into this matchup because this is a great one for him going up against the Los Angeles Chargers. They've allowed the fifth most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks since Week 4. This defense has really been different ever since Derwin James went out. And now we can see Derwin James taking on people in Madden, which is amazing. But you can kind of see the lack of depth that's starting to eat away at the Chargers secondary. And the Chargers have also allowed 2 passing touchdowns in 3 consecutive games. So I look at Tua, who's improving. Obviously, the first week, he didn't have to show much against the Rams because that one kind of got away from LA in that contest. Showed a little bit more against the Cardinals. Really like what he's got going on. And as a matchup goes, and I know if you're choosing between him and Herbert, I'm going to go Herbert. But I think that if you were streaming a quarterback and you see Tua is available, I really love that matchup this week.
I was in that exact position, and one of my leagues only had one quarterback. It was Matt Ryan. He's out on a bye, so then I went and saw who was available. It was Tua, so I picked him up and I plugged him in. I really do think this is going to be a fun matchup, but you just got to hype up Tua. Obviously, now it's my turn to hype up Justin Herbert. This guy has been absolutely insane. I feel bad for Tyrod Taylor because I truly don't feel like he ever got his moment to shine. And that's because the second that Justin Herbert went in for the Chargers, he took over this offense and he has been a dynamic fantasy and real life quarterback. He finished right now as the quarterback 4 if the season ended right now. He's averaging almost 25 fantasy points per game. That's the most by a rookie quarterback in NFL history. He's had over 20 fantasy points in 6 of his 7 starts this season. And another note of why this is such a good matchup against the Dolphins is because just last week, the Dolphins allowed the #1 quarterback. That was Kyler Murray. He got 37 fantasy points. So I really feel like this is going to be a fun contest. Like you said, obviously we also like Tua if you needed to stream a quarterback, but Justin Herbert is the safer start this week. All right, one last one. This one's fun. Carson Wentz versus the Giants are Tom Brady versus the Panthers. Which one are you rocking with?
Oh my gosh. I kind of I like Carson Wentz. I had him in my start ledger this week. Let me just say something about Tom Brady. In Tom Brady this season, it's like the Point Break paradox. And what I mean is like you're looking through the DirecTV viewer's guide and you see that Point Break is on. You don't know which Point Break it's going to be. It could be the Swayze Keanu Reeves one, or it could be the newfangled one, which is awful. And I'm hoping that Tom Brady is going to go old school this week with Keanu Reeves, Patrick Swayze. And for the record, number one, I did watch this the other night. That's why it's top of mind. And number two, it just dawned on me that you've probably never seen the Swayze version and that the current Point Break is your generation's Point Break. And that really bums me out. So now I'm having pause, but the one thing about Brady I will say is that he was obviously awful in prime time and he looked terrible. The last time Tom Brady looked terrible like that, it was against the Chicago Bears. The following week, they came out against the Green Bay Packers and he threw for 166 yards. Okay, well, he didn't throw for that many yards. He did throw 2 touchdowns. They did score 38 points. So I expect the offense to be a little bit better this week against the Carolina Panthers.
All right, high hopes for Tom Brady, but can I be a contrarian here and rock with Carson Wentz instead?
No,
I'm
please.
surprised I'm saying this because I think that entire division is a complete dumpster fire, and I don't think that Carson Wentz has been that good of a fantasy quarterback. He had his worst week against the Dallas Cowboys back in week 8. Then he had a bye week, which he's coming off of, but this matchup is incredible because there have been 4 quarterbacks who have thrown the ball more than 32 times against the New York Giants, and each of them have finished with at least 17 fantasy points and a top 16 quarterback finish. And I think that just highlights the safe floor for Carson Wentz this week, who has hit 35 plus passes in 6 of 8 games this season. So I think the matchup is there. Again, I don't want to slight Tom Brady, and actually maybe I do later on in the show. I don't want to tease it too much because I don't want all the Brady stands to come after me. I don't want any beef with anybody. I'm a happy person. Please do not at me about this. But I do think based on the matchup, Carson Wentz has a better probability of being more fantasy relevant this week.
If I may say one thing, when you said that you were going to take the contrarian's view, I was really scared for a moment that you were going to say the new Point Break is better. And it was really going to be damaging to me. Like, I don't know if I could ever recover.
I wouldn't hurt you like that. I knew that you would take that personally. All right, guys, it is time for a break. But coming off, we are in the playoff push. So Michael F. Fantasy Florio is going to drop his hottest sleepers of the year. And also, should you drop Lamar Jackson or have him on your bench this weekend? Find out next on NFL Fantasy Bites. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to NFL Fantasy Bites. You're lucky because we just had a break. In the entire break, I heard Adam Rank chirping in my ear about Point Break, trying to school Michael F. Fantasy Florio and I on it. But welcome to the show. As always, it is our NFL researcher, analyst extraordinaire, Michael F. Fantasy Florio. You're rocking your floral yet again. It's week 10. Florio, how are you?
I'm good. I have to wear the floral because I don't want to get kicked off the show. And I'm also pretty sure that tonight, instead of watching football, I need to watch Point Break.
Watch the game, Florio. You don't have to. You don't need to do it tonight. I feel like a dad, like trying to get his kids to watch something. Like, you guys got to watch this, and you're like, yeah, whatever, Dad. I don't care.
I think that solidifies you as the old guy on the show. But let's just move past that and get to
Florio. It had been in doubt up until this point.
All right, we gotta keep it pushing, or I'm gonna lose it because Adam Rank cracks me up. All right, Florio, the reason you are here is because you have your top 3 sleepers for week 10. Get me to your first guy so I can continue to laugh at Adam Rank's bad jokes.
Yeah, I have to fight back the laughter right now as well. My first sleeper, though, is Browns quarterback Baker Mayfield. I don't know if he's big into surfing. I don't know if he's seen Point Break yet or not. But I do know that he faces the Texans this week, who have allowed the 5th most fantasy points to quarterbacks this season. Baker's been pretty reliable as of late. He hasn't shown that ceiling yet, but he's thrown at least 2 touchdowns in 5 of his last 7 games. And 2 weeks ago, before the bad weather game that he had, he just absolutely went off. So this is another type of matchup like that. The Texans allow the 6th most touchdowns to quarterbacks. They've allowed a top 8 quarterback in 2 of their last 3 games. It is a favorable matchup for Baker Mayfield. So I think if you're diving a little bit deeper at quarterback, he's a name for you.
Yeah, I love that pick. He's got kind of a Bodie vibe to him, which makes sense to people who have seen that movie. But the one, I love Baker. Like, I never want to come off as a guy who's just, dragging Baker just for the sake of it. I like him, but I just fear that they hand the ball off so much. That's been the only thing that has made me hesitate with him. But I think this matchup is so great that I think 250, a pair of touchdowns, I think that's a reasonable floor for him. So again, in any spot where I need to go stream a quarterback, he is certainly at the top of my list.
Right, and speaking of handing off the ball for the Cleveland Browns, Kareem Hunt obviously is going to play, but also is Nick Chubb. There are reports that he is going to be back and healthy in Week 10, so maybe that will continue to affect the run game. However, I listened to your advice. I read your sleeper column, and I actually did pick up Baker Mayfield in another one of my leagues because I had a guy out on a bye, so we're listening to you. All right, hit me with your second favorite sleeper of the week.
I hope Baker comes through for you, and I think that this next sleeper definitely will come through this week. It is Leonard Fournette going up against the Carolina Panthers, and we know that you can run on the Panthers, but they've also allowed the most receptions per game to running backs at 7 per game, and that's really big for Fournette because he has really taken over this job here as the pass-catching specialist in Tampa Bay. He's averaging set over 6.3 targets per game in the last 3 weeks. Ronald Jones is just over 3. He's played 2/3 of the snaps compared to Jones's 1/3. And then Fournette, again, just the passing game usage, 6 or more targets in each of his last 3 games. Tom Brady's throwing over 9 times per game to the running backs. We know that was a staple of him in New Orleans. I said New Orleans almost. With the Patriots. I don't know why I couldn't say New England there, but he's taken that with him to Tampa Bay, and it's only really helped Leonard Fournette.
Yeah, it's crazy the range that Leonard Fournette has shown going back to last season when he had 70-plus receptions with the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's kind of like when you see the range that Keanu Reeves has as an actor, not only playing a FBI agent, but if you look over there, I got a little Funko Pop of Duke Kaboom. He was the voice of Duke Kaboom, so my 5-year-old daughter actually really does love Keanu Reeves, but in a different role. And so I don't know what that means, but start Leonard Fournette, I think that was going to be my point. I'm just going to cut off the 10 minutes of filibuster talking about movies.
All right, filibuster ended. No more movie chat. All right, Florio, hit me with your last guy. This one's spicy, but it's a guy that once he was added to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he was also added to over 90% of NFL.com leagues. Lots of people wanted to have shares of this guy. Tell him who it is.
Yeah, sticking down in Tampa, not New Orleans or New England. It's Antonio Brown of the now Tampa Bay Bucks playing with Tom Brady down in Tampa Bay. And why I like him this week is the Panthers have allowed the 2nd most catches of 20-plus air yards this year, so you could beat them deep down the field. And that was Antonio Brown's role last week. Like 26% of the Bucks air yards went to Brown. That led the team. He had 2 targets of over 20 air yards that led the team. And he had more usage than I think people were expecting in his first game back. He played 76% of the snaps. That was just behind Godwin and Evans. He ran 33 routes. So he really was out there whenever they were using 3 wide receiver sets. And he was their field stretching wide receiver, not Mike Evans. So I think this is a favorable matchup for Antonio Brown.
And we had mentioned this last week that going into that game against the New Orleans Saints, that Tom Brady had gone deeper this season than he had in any of the last 5 seasons. It was a trend that was picked up by Next Gen Stats. So I anticipate that trend continues, and I think that they're going to heavily target Antonio Brown once again this week.
All right, AB, the Hall of Famer, hopefully he comes out and can perform this week for Tom Brady and the Buccaneers taking on the Panthers. All right, guys, Florio, while you're still here, I want to get to some fan questions. As a reminder, if you ever have questions about your lineup, help fix your flex, all those crazy things, just make sure you tweet us at NFL Fantasy on Twitter, and maybe you'll even get into the show. All right, Hytham, let's bring in some fan questions. Florio, I'm going to kick this one off with you. Mike wants to know, do I go with Drew Lock or Lamar Jackson at quarterback this week? This is crazy. Okay, just take this question.
Yeah, we would have laughed at this coming into the season. We would have laughed at this even a few weeks ago when Drew Lock really hadn't shown us anything. But the last 2 weeks, he's really come to life in favorable matchups. But I'm reluctantly going to stick with Lamar Jackson here. I know it's not the best matchup. I know he hasn't been Lamar Jackson of old, but he still can give you around 18, 20 fantasy points. He's averaging over 18 fantasy points per game this year. And I still think his ceiling, while he hasn't really shown it a whole lot this year, just what he can do with his legs, he can break a long run at any point. His ceiling is so high still, I think, that I'm reluctantly going to play Lamar over Drew Lock.
Yeah, I can understand the disappointment with Lamar Jackson not being the quarterback you thought he was going to be when you drafted him in the second or third round. And there's some disappointment, I understand. But like you said, he's still got the great ceiling. And Drew Lock has played really well over the last couple of weeks. Obviously, a lot of it has come in the second half of games when they've fallen behind and everything like that. But this is not a situation where you just start streaming quarterbacks because, well, because if your game plan is hoping that the Broncos fall behind and Drew Lock's going to have to go out there and deal and throw for 300 yards in the second half, that's not a recipe for success. I will take the safest of floors with Lamar Jackson because of the running ability and start him. So no disrespect to Drew Lock. I think he's a good streamer this week, but good streamers do not replace Lamar Jackson.
All right, so Lamar Jackson it is on that question. All right, another one. Again, another Lamar Jackson question. This one is actually interesting. I'm curious you guys' thoughts on this one. Rank, I'm going to start with you on this question.
Oh.
Do I start Lamar Jackson or Justin Herbert this week?
Once again, you do not put a streamer over Lamar Jackson. The only thing is, Justin Herbert is no longer a streamer. Like, that is the one thing. Like, this is a quarterback that you have to start each and every week. There are a few quarterbacks who have been more consistent than him. His first 7 games in the NFL, no quarterback since at least 1970 has had more fantasy points than Justin Herbert. He's on a record-breaking pace, and you probably picked him up because I'm trying to remember when Lamar's bye week was or whatever your situation is that you have both of these quarterbacks. This is one chance where this is one time where I would say, fine, yeah, I would be going with her. I would have gone with Herbert for the last couple of weeks and I wouldn't have messed around with it. I would have tried to have dealt Lamar Jackson. But I think as it stands right now, Justin Herbert is the better quarterback, at least for fantasy. So I would never question this again. And I would start Herbert for the rest of the season.
Florio, you in agreement here?
Yeah.
I know this is kind of spicy.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to say everything that Rank and I said about Lamar, his safe rushing floor, that rushing ability giving him a high ceiling, throw it out for this one. Like, Justin Herbert has the better matchup of the two. And Justin Herbert last week had a down week for Justin Herbert. He still gave you 24 fantasy points and was a top 10 quarterback.
All right, we're on the Herbie train. I love it. Kind of sad for Lamar Jackson. I still think he's a great quarterback, but in terms of fantasy, it seems like Justin Herbert is the safer option. Hytham, let's fly in one more fan question while we have Florio here. David, amazing name. He wants to know, Mike Davis or Chase Edmonds this week? Florio, starting with you.
I know he let you down last week, but I'm still riding with Chase Edmonds here. He has that passing game on lockdown in that backfield, and then he's getting more carries now with Kenny and Drake out. And this is a favorable matchup for him. The Bills, their defense hasn't been what it was in the last couple of seasons. And Mike Davis, on the other hand, goes up against the Tampa Bay Bucks defense that is allowing the fewest rushing yards per game to running backs. They are just so tough against the run that if you start Mike Davis, I'm not saying sit him this week, but of these two I would. But if you start Mike Davis, you're just hoping that he can rack up 5-6 catches in the second half.
I played high school basketball with a guy named Davider. I don't know. This is probably not that person, but I do like Chase Edmonds as well in this game. And I thought that last week he got a lot of volume and didn't really put up the point production that you would figure for somebody that was touching the ball as much as he did, but it was absolutely the right play. It was a smash matchup. This week is also another good matchup for him, so I'm going to go back to it again. It's interesting because we've seen this with Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt this season has been a better running back with Nick Chubb in the lineup. Like, you look at the numbers, and he's a better running back with Nick Chubb there. I don't know if that's going to be the case for Chase Edmonds, but if he's going to end up being the guy who takes this number one role when Kenyon Drake returns, this is the week that he has to really establish himself. So I have no hesitation getting him back into our lineup. I think we're going to see him break through, and I think this is going to be a monster game for him.
I'm just a little burned after last week's performance. And then when you were talking about Kyler Murray earlier in the show, Rank, a huge upside of Kyler Murray is that he can rush the ball as well. He also utilizes himself as a running back. So obviously I do think maybe Chase Edmonds is the better start between the two. But with Christian McCaffrey out and not playing because of that shoulder injury, Mike Davis is going to continue to get the bulk of that production in the run game. And the last time that he did face the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, he put up over 15 fantasy points. So that's not a bad performance at all. So I'm kind of leaning Mike Davis on this one, but that's mostly because I got burnt last week by Chase Edmonds.
Understood.
All right, Florio, you gave us just 3 sleepers earlier, but you have the full list of your week 10 sleepers. People can go to NFL.com/Florio to find that list, but that's not the only list that you put out every single week. Tell people where they can find your NFL rankings.
Yeah, head over to NFL.com/rankings, like while you're watching Point Break later or something like that. You could go over your fantasy football lineups, and it's as simple as just NFL.com/rankings.
All right, amazing. Florio, thank you as always for joining us. Thank you for always also rocking your flyest floral shirt. All right, it's time for a break, but when we come back, we are going to tell you which players are going to go bazonkers this weekend and have your team partying like rock stars. Plus, we got some spicy, bold predictions. You're watching NFL Fantasy Bites. We'll be right back. Welcome back to NFL Fantasy Bites. This is probably my favorite part of the show, even though I love having Florio here as well. It's time for Club Dub. These are the players that we guarantee are going to get you over 25 fantasy points this week. You heard the party air horn. That's when you know it's about to go down. Adam Rank, hit me with your Club Dub player of the week.
You know, I'm going to step outside the box a little bit, and I'm going to say that Travis Fulgham is going to have a monster game this week against the New York Giants. And I think, I know that I said earlier in the show that I liked Carson Wentz, but I really like Travis Fulgham and what he has been able to do this season. He is averaging close to 20 fantasy points per game. That makes him the wide receiver 5. He's had at least 12 fantasy points in every game this season, a touchdown in 4 out of his last 5. He's targeted anytime that they get near the end zone. So this is a guy that you got to get into your lineup each and every week. And I know that I ranted about this a couple of weeks ago, and I still feel like we need to talk about this more. This player was once a member of the Green Bay Packers, and they let him go. So anytime you're like, the Packers should get another receiver, Travis Fulgham, you had him, but it's all good. I think he's going to have a monster game, and thank you to my friend Mark DiPaolo, who traded him to me this week in my league of record. I gave him Giovanni Bernard. I thought it was a fair trade, but I'm looking forward to getting this guy into my lineup.
Get him into your lineup, and you will be smiling because you're guaranteeing that he is going to bring home more than 25 fantasy points. All right, it's time for my Club Dub Player of the Week, but I'm not just giving you one guy. I'm giving you 2 because the matchup is just oh so juicy and oh so good. It's Cooper Kupp and Jared Goff going up against the Seattle Seahawks. This is like a matchup heaven for me. I understand that Jared Goff, he had a down game a few weeks ago against the Miami Dolphins. Then they had a bye. They're coming back from a bye, and the bounce back is going to be strong because the Seattle Seahawks are allowing the most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks as well as wide receivers. Cooper Kupp, that last game he played against the Dolphins, he had 110 receiving yards and 22 fantasy points. I think he's going to have even more than that. I'm waiting for Jared Goff to have his bounce back. He's had 2+ passing touchdowns in 3 of his last 4 games. The Seahawks, their defense has just not been great. That's why we see Russell Wilson putting up such incredible fantasy numbers because they're trying to play catch up. matchup and they're trying to win these football games. So because of the matchup, I'm rocking with these two guys, and I'm excited to get them into my starting lineup. And the two of them combined over 50 fantasy points. This is a top stack of the week for me. All right, those were our favorite Club Dub players of the week. But now we got a new segment. It's called Full Send. We're fully sending it there. These are bold predictions. Don't add us if they come true or add us if they come wrong. I didn't even say that correctly, but I don't care. I'm so fired up. This is Full Send. Adam Rank, what is your full send of the week?
Well, I'm going to follow your lead. I'm going to give you a 2-for-1. My full send this week is that Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissic both finish in the top 10. Full send right there. I love this matchup for the Washington football team going up against the Detroit Lions, who have allowed the most fantasy points to running backs this season. Antonio Gibson did pop up on the injury reports. We'll have to keep an eye on that as the weekend gets closer. I do understand, too, that Antonio Gibson is a little bit of a touchdown-dependent running back, but the good news is the Detroit Lions have given up the most touchdowns to running backs this season. And we've also seen J.D. McKissic, who, if I'm not mistaken, is playing in a revenge game. He has had such a great role as a receiver out of the backfield. He's getting targeted a ton. He had 14 targets last week. I anticipate that number to be similar once again. There's three guys you want to play in this game. It's the two running backs. It's Terry McLaurin. So both of these running backs, top 10, full send, book it, and all that good stuff.
I love it. I went and picked up J.D. McKissic on the waiver wire because I had Christian McCaffrey. I was so happy he was back, and then he went back and got injured again with that shoulder injury, and then J.D. McKissic, somehow he was available on the waiver wire, and like you said, that matchup against the Lions, they're giving up the most fantasy points to running backs this season, so fully sending it with you. All right, it's time for my full send. I'm going to sit back in my seat for this one because I know people are going to at me and get mad at me, but I don't care. I'm a spicy girl. I can handle it. My full send is that Tom Brady is going to do exactly what he did last week against the New Orleans Saints and not be fantasy productive at all. Tom Brady, he's not going to be good this week going up against the Carolina Panthers. He put up less than 3 fantasy points against the Saints. Everyone's like, oh, everyone has one bad game. One bad game. He didn't even throw a passing touchdown. He had 0 touchdowns. Instead, he had 3 interceptions. That was the 3rd game of his career with 0 touchdowns and 3+ interceptions. Brady, he's rostered in 98% of NFL.com leagues. 98% of people have trust in Tom Brady, and then he puts up less than 3 fantasy points. You know his second lowest game of the season? It was in week 10 up against the Carolina Panthers, who he's taking on this week. He had less than 9 fantasy points. So don't at me on this one. Tom Brady, it's not going to happen.
You know what? No, I understand exactly what you're saying. And there's even a possibility that if Brady is really good, he could be giving a lot of production to Leonard Fournette near the goal line as well, because the Panthers give up a lot of yards on the ground and a lot of points to running backs. So this could be a game where Brady's efficient and then doesn't necessarily give you a lot of points. It's a tough, like, again, it's the Point Break parable. Is it going to be the Swayze one or the new one? The new one, by the way, is visually stunning, but it's still like, I can't do it, but I'm with you. I'm feeling worse and worse about Brady as the week goes forward, and you're not helping any. Actually, you are helping. Thank you.
Okay, well, that's what I'm here for. Also, you said the filibuster was done on the movie. What are you doing here? No more Point Break. Get it over with. All right, just a reminder, you guys can watch NFL games for free inside of the all-new NFL Fantasy app. Here's the app here. All you got to do is tap the little TV button at the top. You can watch games for free. What's my record? It's 6-3. And I play you in this league. Should I tell you what your record is? Because it's not good. Let's just pause for one moment. Adam Rank. Oh, you're 5-4. I'm above you.
Okay.
Do you see that? Adam Rank's right there. I'm right there. Yeah. Don't at me, bro.
Is that the league that I've won 4 times? Okay. Well, thank you. By the way, though, we're also on another. Listen, don't get saucy with me. So obviously, you saw us earlier today on NFL Fantasy Live. We're also on another show Sunday mornings called NFL Fantasy Game Day that you can watch on that all-new NFL Fantasy app. You can watch it on YouTube, Facebook, NFL.com, pretty much any social media means. And we'll go through all the latest matchups, get you ready for the Week 10 games. There's going to be a lot of a lot of afternoon games this week because of the Masters. So you're going to need to watch us Sunday morning now more than ever, and it comes to you noon Eastern on the all-new NFL Fantasy app. You consider, I'll pull back the curtain a little bit. You can watch the Masters. Just have us on that second screen. Watch it on your phone on the all-new NFL Fantasy app. And you'll be sound as a pound.
Sound as a pound. Adam Rank, always a pleasure to see you, my friend. Always a pleasure for all of you guys joining and watching NFL Fantasy Bites. TNF is kicking off in just a few hours. It's Derrick Henry and the Titans taking on Phillip Rivers and the Colts. It's week 10, closer and closer to the fantasy playoffs. Thanks so much for joining, guys. See you next Thursday.